The first word is juxtaposition. I think we talked about this a little bit before, but let's get the official definition now. Spell it like this, juxtaposition. All right. Juxtaposition, the definition is placing two concepts or ideas near or next to each other so the reader will compare and contrast them. Placing two concepts or ideas near or next to each other so the reader will compare and contrast them. So we see juxtaposition all the time in film. That's 5 degrees in film, so that's always where I heard the idea, which is like you have one image in the movie and then you cut to another image, and that would create this juxtaposition by putting the two images next to each other, right? So in language, you would have one idea or one word or one metaphor, and on the other side, you'd have another idea or word or metaphor. And when you place them next to each other, that automatically causes the audience to compare and contrast those two things. And with juxtaposition, it's usually a contrast. You're usually pointing out the differences that those two things have. So a really famous example, don't write this one down, but a famous example is like you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain, right? That's a famous example of juxtaposition because you've got hero and villain and you put them in the sentence together to compare the qualities of each. Yeah, Sam.
I don't know what chapter did we miss, but we missed the key.
Could be a juxtaposition, could also just be a metaphor though. That's in the very first paragraph of the book. And that could just be, he's comparing them like, you know, saying slaves are like horses. A bigger juxtaposition would be like, do you remember when we read about the two slave owners? I don't remember. One of them was Hopkins, and I don't remember the other one. Severe, yeah. And he put Severe and Hopkins in paragraphs right next to each other in order to juxtapose their styles of punishment. Yeah, Carson.
Could another one be like in chapter 9, how it goes from this cruel slave owner to the hope of like being enlightened by religion?
Yes. Yes, the juxtaposition between the cruelty of the slave owner and Christianity and our expectations for Christianity is definitely a juxtaposition he makes. Yeah. Yeah, Ben.
Would it be when he's talking about how cool the master is, then it goes to his father, who's a nice, sterile man, and so, like, that's why he left the horse out, because he wanted to go there.
Yep.
You don't need the master.
Yep. Yeah, that creates that juxtaposition between the two. Yep. Okay, let's just look at a single sentence though. Write this one down. This is from the sentence we were just writing about with meanness. It says, he was cruel but cowardly. So that creates a juxtaposition. The opposite of cruelty, what is the opposite of cruelty, by the way? Kindness, right? So those two things aren't necessarily opposite. He says cruel but cowardly, and he sets it up so that we read it. When we read that, we think, oh, those two things are opposite each other. But they don't necessarily have to be, right? It's that word but in the middle that creates that opposition between the two. And it makes our minds want to compare and contrast the two. So under effects, and this one does not have to be as long because we have 3 words today, but under effects, write about why you think he wants us to put those 2 words in juxtaposition, cruel and cowardly. When Luke was talking about the consequences and him expecting something and not getting that consequence, that is an example of juxtaposition too. I would say this is the number 1 strategy he uses most often in his sentence structures. A little bit longer. Okay, let me give you the next one. So our next word is parallelism. Parallelism. Parallelism is the use of components in a sentence that are grammatically the same. The use of components in a sentence that are grammatically the same or similar in the construction, sound, or meaning. I'll say it again. Parallelism is the use of components in a sentence that are grammatically the same or similar in the construction, sound, meaning, or meter. Okay, so this could be a list-like structure where the writer is presenting a whole bunch of things in a row that are set up grammatically similar. Let me show you an example of parallelism in this. Just have to find it. I marked it. There it is. Okay, it's right underneath where we were reading before in that second paragraph. It says, his heirs, words, and actions were the heirs, words, and actions of born slaveholders. That's an example of parallelism. So use that one. His heirs, words, and actions were the heirs, words, and actions of born slaveholders. And then after that, he says, but you don't have to write this part down, but it says, and being assumed were awkward enough. He was not even a good imitator. All right, what do you think the effect is of setting that up in a grammatically similar manner? His heirs, words, or his heirs, words, and actions? Or his heirs, words, and actions, yeah.
I just totally forgot what I was gonna say. It like emphasizes those three qualities that like are he's trying to like imitate, but that's not working.
Yeah, okay, good. So it's like this repetition of the qualities that you think would make it maybe easier to imitate then if you're repeating those qualities over and over. Cooper?
It also gives it a natural flow. It makes it kind of flow from one idea to the next.
Yeah.
Instead of like cats, hand grenades, and I don't know.
That's a disturbing juxtaposition, actually. Yeah, okay, so it does have that sense of flow, right? Whenever a writer uses parallelism, well, it does give us this feeling that he is in charge of his writing tools, for sure. In this case, when he's talking about imitation, why do you think he would use that repetition right there? I think weirdly, the parallelism creates another juxtaposition. Because the heirs, words, and what's the other word? Actions is repeated, so it's successfully imitated in the sentence. And then he says, but he was not a good imitator. So I think it's what Isaac said, where it's just like, if he repeats it over and over again, he should have been able to imitate those things, but he actually has no powers of imitation. So it just kind of sets up a little mini argument in that sentence. Okay, you ready for the third one? Let's see, hurrah or no?
Hurrah!
Okay, one second. Okay, I'm going on with the third one because I want to give you a bit of brainstorming time at the end. Okay, the third one is alliteration. Since we've mentioned it so many times, let's get it written down. Alliteration is the repetition of the same letter or sound. Repetition of the same letter or sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. Repetition of the same letter or sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. Yeah. Yes. Alliteration is the repetition of the same letter or sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. So the words don't have to be together. They could have a couple, words in between. You ever do this for your name? Like Whitney weeps. Luke laughs. All right, so look at, how do I even describe this? It's like, so the second paragraph is super long in this chapter, right? And it's kind of in the middle of that where it says prior to his conversion. It says, prior to his conversion, he relied upon his own depravity to shield and sustain him in his savage barbarity. But after his conversion, he found religious sanction and support for his slave-holding cruelty. That's the part I want you to pay attention to for the alliteration. He found religious sanction and support for his slave-holding cruelty. You notice how that S sound repeats over and over again? He found religious sanction and support for his slave-holding cruelty. Okay, now that sets him up as a good writer, right? A good kind of poetic kind of writer. But why does he want to connect those specific words with sounds? Why does he want to connect, for example, sanction and support with slaveholding? Carson?
It kind of connects Christianity to slaveholding.
Yeah, exactly. That word sanction is really, really important there, right? Connecting sanction with slaveholding creates this inextricable connection between Christianity in America and slaveholding, right? Do you know what sanction means?
Allowing.
Yeah, it's like to allow something to happen, right? It's official permission for something. But do you know what that center word, or what the root word of it, sanct, means? Where else do you hear the word sanct? Sanctuary, sanctify, sacrosanct. So what would you guess that root word means? Not quite, actually. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, Carson?
Well, I mean, I looked it up.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
It means holy.
Holy, yeah, it's a religious word, sanct. So to provide sanction from something, you're not only giving official like approval, but that comes from official Christian approval. So it's like this Christianity is like American Christianity is making slaveholding holy kind of idea. And he gets those ideas even tighter together, that inextricably linked idea, by using the alliteration, these words in a row that have the same sound. So I'm hoping those are 3 words that could help you. There's so many other ways, though, that he is convincing us, right? And even in chapter 9, you found a bunch. You don't have to have the official name for it to describe what he's doing. Yeah, Finn?
So with an alliteration,
Yeah.
How many words? I mean, I've always had a hard time with what counts as an alliteration. Like,
I think if it's in one
Like,
sentence.
if it's in one sentence, even if there's like 2 words, that,
Yeah.
like there's like a cruelty and something else. Like, oh, he was cruel but cowardly.
Yeah,
Would that count?
that's alliteration for sure.
Okay.
Yep. And it's even got the cr at the beginning, not just the C sound. Yeah. Even if it's in like 2 sentences next to each other, sometimes you could say it's alliteration. Yeah. Any other questions about the vocab? Okay. So what I want to do here